Please like and subscribe this channel to get you latest video lessons in music, arts, physical education and health grade 10. Are you ready? Before you listen to this video lesson on music, arts, physical education and health grade 7 week 2. Bring out the things you need like your book and module in week 2 first quarter. And listen carefully to this video lesson. Grade 10. Week 2. Activity 2. Most essential learning competency. Music. Music of the 20th century. Explains the performance practice, setting, composition, role of composers, performer and audience of 20th century music. Code MU10TCIBG4. Please listen to the discussion and the activity follows. Impressionism. This movement was influenced by the painting created by Claude Monet, Impression, Sunrise. Musical Impressionism is the name given to a movement in European classical music that arose in the late 19th century and continued into the middle of the 20th century. Originating in France, musical impressionism is characterized by suggestion and atmosphere, and eschews the emotional excesses of the Romantic era. The influence of visual impressionism on its musical counterpart is debatable. Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel are generally considered the greatest impressionist composers, but Debussy disavowed the term, calling it the invention of critics. Claude Debussy, 1862–1918. He was the primary exponent of the Impressionist movement and the focal point for other Impressionist composers. He changed the course of musical development by dissolving traditional rules and conventions into a new language of possibilities in harmony, rhythm, form, texture, and color. The whole tone scale was used by Claude Debussy, requiring an interval of whole step, and also appeared occasionally in the 20th century. Claude Debussy was also known as the father of modern school of composition. Maurice Ravel, 1875–1937. The compositional style of Ravel is mainly characterized by its uniquely innovative but not atonal style of harmonic treatment. It is defined with intricate and sometimes modal melodies and extended chordal components. It demands considerable technical virtuosity from the performer, which is the character, ability, or skill of a virtuoso, a person who excels in musical technique or execution. Many of his works deal with water in its flowing or stormy moods as well as with human characterizations. The term expressionism was probably first applied to music in 1918 and associated with Arnold Schoenberg. It was also influenced by the visual arts expressionism that shows powerful emotion and avoided the traditional forms of beauty. Expressionist music seeks to eliminate all conventional elements and produce a tonal style of music. Expressionist music often features a high level of dissonance, extreme contrasts of dynamics, constant changing of textures, distorted melodies and harmonies, and angular melodies with wide leaps. Arnold Schoenberg, 1874–1951. His music became increasingly dissonant and chromatic in the style of expressionism. The sense of key or tonal center became less and less obvious, eventually resulting in atonality. Although full of melodic and lyrical interest, his music is also extremely complex, creating heavy demands on the listener. His works were met with extreme reactions, either strong hostility from the general public or enthusiastic acclaim from his supporters. There was so much unrest at one concert that the police were called. Arnold Schoenberg was also credited in using 12-tone scale. Igor Stravinsky, 1882–1971. Stravinsky's early music reflected the influence of his teacher, the Russian composer Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. His composition The Rite of Spring, 1913, was another outstanding work. A new level of dissonance was reached and the sense of tonality was practically abandoned. Asymmetrical rhythms successfully portrayed the character of a solemn pagan rite. He eventually left his country and migrated to United States of America and became an American citizen. Stravinsky abandoned his style and cultivated his neoclassical style. Neoclassicism was a 20th century trend that sought the return of aesthetic perception associated with the broadly defined concept of classicism, namely order, balance, clarity, economy, and emotional restraint. The neoclassical impulse found its expression in such features as the use of pared-down performing forces, an emphasis on rhythm and on contrapuntal texture, an updated or expanded tonal harmony, and a concentration on absolute music as opposed to romantic program music. Igor Stravinsky is also a prominent composer of neoclassicism. Bela Bartok, 1874–1951, as a neoclassicist, primitivist, and nationalist composer. Bartók used Hungarian folk themes and rhythms. He also utilized changing meters and strong syncopations. His compositions were successful because of their rich melodies and lively rhythms. Sergei Prokofiev, 1874–1951. Prokofiev is regarded today as a combination of neoclassicist, nationalist, and avant-garde composer. His style is uniquely recognizable for its progressive technique, pulsating rhythms, melodic directness, and a resolving dissonance. He was highly successful in his piano music, as evidenced by the wide acceptance of his piano concerti and sonatas, featuring toccata-like rhythms and biting harmonic dissonance within a classical form and structure. Electronic music. The first electronic devices for performing music in the history of electronic music were developed at the end of 19th century. Shortly afterward, Italian futurists explored sounds that had previously not been considered musical. During the 1920s and 1930s, electronic instruments were introduced and the first compositions for electronic instruments were composed. By 1940s, magnetic audio tape allowed musicians to tape sounds and then modify them by changing the tape speed or direction. Musique concrète was created in Paris in 1948. It was based on editing together recorded fragments of natural and industrial sounds. Music produced in Germany in 1953. Electronic music composers and their role. Edgard Varèse, 1883–1965. Known as the father of electronic. He was considered an innovative French-born composer. However, he spent the greater part of his life and career in the United States, where he pioneered and created new sounds that bordered between music and noise. Electronic music composers and their role. Karlheinz Stockhausen, 1928. He is a central figure in the realm of electronic music. Stockhausen's music was initially met with resistance due to its heavily atonal content with practically no clear melodic or rhythmic sense. Still, he continued to experiment with musique concrète. His Helicopter String Quartet, in which a string quartet performs whilst airborne in 4 different helicopters, develops his long-standing fascination with music which moves in space. Chance music originates from the Latin word, alea, which means dice. Aleatoric chance is music in which some element of the composition is left to chance, and/or some primary element of a composed work's realization is left to the determination of its performers. The term is most often associated with procedures in which the chance element involves a relatively limited number of possibilities. John Cage, 1912–1992. John Cage is the 20th-century conceptual artist who famously composed the piano piece titled 4 Feet 33, 1952, which consists of the pianist sitting at a piano and not playing for exactly 4 minutes and 33 seconds. He continued to experiment and push the boundaries music and embarked on a career of what he called an exploration of non-intention. Activity 1. Now you know. Direction. Give a brief answer in the following questions based on what you know about the 20th century music. Write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. What group of people inspired of many of Bartók's composition? What kind of musical style is attributed to Schoenberg and Stravinsky? Who is considered the foremost impressionist? Who was the French composer known as the father of electronic music? Who composed an experimental helicopter string quartet played inside 4 different helicopters? Activity 2. Experiment with the sounds of 20th century music system. Chance music. Put small items inside a bag. Include coins, pins, small bells, and other articles with percussive sounds. Pour the bag's contents on a hard surface and record the sounds that are produced with a cell phone or other available device. Put the items back in the bag and unload the same while once again recording the sounds being produced. Note the changes between the two sets of sounds recorded. Electronic music. Create short electronic music pieces using your knowledge of 20th century musical styles. Check yourself. Complete the diagram. Put a brief information or facts and composers on the following boxes. First quarter. Arts. Expressionism. A bold new movement. Most essential learning competency. Identifies distinct characteristics of arts from the various art movements. Identifies representative artist and Filipino counterparts from various movements. Code A10ELLA2, A10ELLA3. Expressionism. It denotes an art form in which reality has been distorted and exaggerated for emotional effect. The aim of Expressionism was not to replicate an impression inferred by the surrounding world, but rather to enforce the artist's own emotional response to the world's representation so as to distinguish its true meaning. It was a movement in which objective reality was displaced by subjective emotions, with the consequence that a long-lasting climate of self-expression spread. Expressionism utilized bold, distorted lines, with rough brushstrokes and strong colors to create an experience that was meant to invoke an emotional response. Characteristics of Expressionism art. Distorted outlines 4. Rough brush strokes, strong colors 5. Exaggerated forms not about realism 6. Connection between artist and viewer and work. Neoprimitivism. Incorporated elements from the native arts of the South Sea Islanders and the wood carvings of the African tribes that surged in popularity at that time. Amedeo Modigliani. Head and Yellow Sweater. Used the oval faces and elongated shapes of African art in both his sculptures and paintings. Fauvism. Bold, vibrant colors and visual distortions. Its name was derived from Les Fauves, wild beasts, referring to the group of French expressionist painters who painted in this style. Henri Matisse. Woman with Hat, and Blue Window. Dadaism. Characterized by dream fantasies, memory images and visual tricks and surprises. Giorgio de Chirico. Melancholy and mystery of a street. Surrealism. Was a style that depicted an illogical, subconscious dream world that seemed to exist beyond the logical, conscious, physical one. Its name came from the term, superrealism, with its artworks clearly expressing a departure from reality as though the artist were dreaming, seeing illusions, or experiencing an altered mental state. Salvador Dali. Persistence of memory. Social realism. Expressed the artist's role in social reform. Artists used their work to protest against the injustices, inequalities, immortality and ugliness of the human condition. Ben Shahn. Miners' Wives, and Pablo Picasso. Guernica. Among the Filipino counterparts from the various art movements were Ben Cabrera B. August 27, 1942, a Filipino pioneer of the arts and a significant influence among his peers. He has been noted as, arguably the best-selling painter of his generation of Filipino artists. Studied at the University of the Philippines College of Arts. From Hillman to Sergeant 1978, Sabel 1965. Jose Hoya, June 3, 1931 d. 1996, a printmaker, mixed media artist and a former dean of the University of the Philippines College of Fine Arts. His canvases were characterized by dynamic spontaneity and quick gestures of action painting. Pioneered abstract expressionism in the Philippines. His compositions described as vigorous compositions of heavy impastos, bold brushstrokes, controlled dips and diagonal swipes. Hills of Nico 1964 and Mariveles. Alfonso Osorio, August 2, 1916 to December 5, 1990, his first solo exhibition in 1941 at Betty Parsons' legendary Wakefield Gallery in New York City. Internationally recognized for his complex and challenging visual language, he has been the subject of numerous exhibitions and publications. The Angry Christ 1950, and Congregation. Emmanuel Garibay 2010-11 was born in Cadapawan, North Cotabato, Philippines in 1962. He is known as much for his expressionist figurative style as for the content of many of his works, which often express a keen social and political consciousness, social realism. Activity 1. In this time of crisis that the world is facing because of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, the health and safety of everybody is at risk, forcing most of us to a swift reconsideration of our current and future plans, work activities and a way of life in general. How do you feel about this? What is your opinion on what is happening in our country? Find a way to express yourself through painting, drawing. Choose one among the following art styles: neo-primitivism, Fauvism, Dadaism, Surrealism, social realism, and apply its characteristics on your work. You may decide to create illustrations about the following. Activity 1. In this time of crisis that the world is facing because of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, the health and safety of everybody is at risk, forcing most of us to a swift reconsideration of our current and future plans, work activities and a way of life in general. How do you feel about this? What is your opinion on what is happening in our country? Find a way to express yourself through painting, drawing. Choose one among the following art styles: neo-primitivism, Fauvism, Dadaism, Surrealism, social realism, and apply its characteristics on your work. You may decide to create illustrations about the following. You may decide to create illustrations about the following. Importance of taking care of your mental health during this time of isolation. Paying tribute to healthcare workers on the front line because of the pandemic, or share messages of support against stigma and discrimination. Reflection of how my life has prepared me for the pandemic, and other ideas. Materials: acrylic paint, oil pastel or any coloring materials. 1/16 illustration board. Cut the 1/8 illustration board in half, then set it aside for the next art activity. Rubrics for the art activity. Following instruction is worth 5 points. Creativity gives you 5 points. For your effort will give you 5 points. All in all, an art will have the highest score of 15 points in total. Activity 2. My reflection, based on your first activity. Direction. Answer each question in a short paragraph form. Why do you make this type of art? Why are you drawn to this subject? What does your artwork represent? Does your art something represent about you? Does it represent a message about the world? Does it focus on a piece of history or look to the future? What inspires you? What connection do you have to your art? How do you make it? Why do you use certain materials? What does your art mean to you? Activity 3. Direction. Answer each question in a short paragraph form. How was expressionist art developed in modern society? Were all surrealist artworks gloomy? Support your answer. Which among the forms of expressionism, Fauvism, Dadaism, Surrealism, social realism appeals to you the most? And which does not appeal to you at all? Explain why. Expressionism in Philippine art. Research online for works by Filipino artists, aside from the one mentioned above, who used variations of this style, e.g., Cesar Legazpi. Give your personal reaction to these.
Good day to you. Before we start with the lesson, subscribe and hit the notification bell to be updated with the latest video lessons. Shall we?
What is the lesson today, teacher?
Grade 10 Physical Education. PE. Physical Activity and Physical Fitness Assessment. Grade 10 Physical Education. Week 2 Day 3. Assess physical activity, exercise and eating habits. Code. PE 10 PF Law H39. Engage in moderate to vigorous physical activities for at least 60 minutes in a day in and out of school. Code. PE 10 PF Pound H45.
Activity 1. BMI and physical fitness. Procedure for Activity 1: Body Mass Index and Physical Fitness. First, you need to know your weight in kilogram and height in meter, then compute for your body mass index. Use the result of your BMI to know what types of activities you should do to improve or maintain your body mass index. Complete the worksheet by supplying the result of your BMI, weight and height and necessary physical activities. First quarter. Week 2 Day 4. Health. Promoting and sustaining a lifelong wellness. Explains the guidelines and criteria in the selection and evaluation of health information, product and services. Code H10CH Lab 20. All of us are consumers. We acquire health information, purchase health products, and avail of health services to appraise, to improve, and to maintain our health. Consumer health aims to develop a person's ability to evaluate and utilize health information, products, and services wisely and effectively. Health information is any idea that we hear from people around us, read from books and other printed materials, or from the media that influence our health. The type of information varies depending on diseases, sexual health, weight loss, gain, drugs and alcohol, depression, mental illness, violence, smoking, eating disorders, acne, skin care, local clinics, and sexual assault. Payne, et al. 2005. The information is critical as it may alter the health conditions of a person. Another important characteristic of health information is that it is continuously and rapidly changing. Thus, it should be timely, relevant, culturally appropriate, accessible, and delivered in a relevant format. Galvez-Tan, et al. 2009. Health products are items that we consume to improve our well-being, like medicine, food, clothes, furniture, electronics, and household urban hazardous substances and/or a combination of and/or a derivative thereof. FDA Act, 2009, etc. Credibility. This tells about the source and recency of the information. Who or what is the source of the information product? Is the source qualified? Is the information updated? Content. This tells about the accuracy, disclaimer, and completeness of information. Does it have scientific basis? Does it state the limitations, purpose, scope, authority and currency of the information? Does it have labels that contain the directions for use and storage, expiration date and warnings? Disclosure. This tells about the purpose and caveat of the information. What is the purpose of giving the information product? Is it for marketing purposes? Is it for selling products or for disseminating information? Interactivity. This tells about the feedback mechanism and means of information exchange between the source and the consumer. Can the consumer offer comment and suggestions? Is it possible to ask questions? Activity 1. Once upon a time. Read the situation and answer the questions below. Read and answer the questions that follows. A teenager once went to the local market to buy materials for a science project. Upon passing by some stalls, he was invited for a free orientation on the latest product of a company. The company was selling health ring that can detect mood of a person and help lower body temperature and blood pressure. The teenager was easily attracted, which made him buy 2 health rings for himself and his sister. He spent 600 pesos for the items. After a week, the teenager and his sister developed red spot and rashes on their fingers. Upon checking, the rings were covered rust around them. The teenager wants to file a complaint so the company may return his money. Please like and subscribe this channel to get you latest video lessons in music, arts, physical education and health grade 10. After you have listened to this video lesson on music, arts, physical education and health grade 7 week 2, please notify your teacher about finished activities and even unfinished activities. Goodbye.